I haven't seen a sexy cult leader, and that's something that I think we're not ready for as a society.
Hello and welcome back to Why We Don't Date These Guys. I'm Naomi Guy,
Joel guy.
and today we have a very special guest. I met him at a funeral. Okay, I take that back. It was a memorial service. He works as a social worker here in Arizona, but soon to be a community health worker. He's a Quaker. He posts some great memes on Instagram. We're friends on Instagram too. It's Erick Escalara!
Hello, and yeah, I always use memorial and funeral opportunities to network. By the way,
Yeah, Naomi, you got to stop finding us podcast guests at funerals. First we had that guy named RJ, then we had that actor we paid to pretend to be our brother, and now this person. I mean,
the pallbearer episode was really good. He provided some real insights.
yeah, yeah. I feel maybe it was in poor taste to do an entire episode on how to pick people up at funerals, but it's a tough dating market out there, and I gotta say, there's a lot of desperate, sad people looking for comfort at funerals. Take advantage of the opportunities that God and life gives you.
Sometimes when recording on Zoom, I just like have to I have to restrain myself, on the SNL skits where they just like break out laughing in the middle of it. But I feel like that's me right now where I just like can't laugh because it will like overtake other people's audio. So I'm trying really hard to just SNL it right now. So,
Naomi once more is comparing our podcast to the quality of SNL, and I can't tell if that's an insult or a compliment.
anyways, back to your topic.
I just,
Eric, would you like to briefly describe yourself as a person, who you are, your likes, your interests, your dislikes, your ex's
yeah,
name? I'm just kidding.
I'd like to just first start off by with a quick anecdote. You invited me on. You told me about your podcast, and I was very, very fascinated. And I said that is something I could talk about for hours. Is relationships and relationship culture and intimacy and things like that. And you sent me over a text about what the podcast could be, and I'm trying to remember. You just said, yeah, if you can just come on, we like to talk about stats and different like trends. And when you said stats, I thought you meant my dating stats, and I thought I would have to come on and say like what my batting average is, how many girlfriends I've had, and like all the different types of like I thought I would have to like get into details about my kinks and things like that, but then I realized she meant statistics like society and dating, and I was like that actually makes way more sense. But that's how vulnerable I was willing to be for this podcast.
Aw.
Um, about me, let's get to the nitty gritty. I've been in a very happy relationship for going on 8 months with a
Woohoo!
wonderful person that lives here in Tempe, and I will just call her girlfriend for right now until I get more comfortable. You guys have to extract that information from me. Um, I'm 27, living in beautiful Tempe, Arizona, a crisp, I think 70 degrees right now. And I've lived in Phoenix, Arizona my whole life. I am a Hispanic, heterosexual, cisgendered male, and I'm working as a social worker. I call myself a social worker, but I'm working as a therapist right now for youth and family. A lot of my professional experience is working in domestic violence, working with families impacted by abuse and neglect. I have very much encountered all different types of personal abuse encounters and all types of systemic barriers and obstacles that victims of domestic violence face. And I have had a chance to work one on one with those people and finding stabilization and healing. Um, so when you said that you had a podcast about dating, I did sort of invite myself. I left a very wide door open, and I think I just left it like, oh, like wouldn't it be interesting to have someone like me be on your podcast? And then you just pretty much immediately picked up on that. So thank you for inviting me.
You're so welcome. I would like to say that we love having guests on because it means that we don't have to spend hours on an outline. So you're really just helping us as much as we're helping you.
The
Yeah,
$500 stipend you offered really like sealed the
Shh, you're
deal.
not supposed to tell. We only offer that to you, no one else.
uh,
yeah, I am constantly frustrated by the fact that we spend so many hours working on detailed scripts, analyzing issues from all perspectives. We spend all of this time developing comprehensive overviews of a new conservative dating app or a
mhm.
sex ed presentation or whatnot. And then the episodes where we just invite someone on and like riff for an hour get more views than any of those. And I'm like, if the people want it, the people will get it.
I definitely I did prepare myself. Um but I do want to be more candid than I am. I'm not on the clock today. It's Sunday. I do want to be able to be a human talking about these issues and not that professional guys that I put up at work, which are two different people. I am a very easygoing person outside of work, and then at work, people have no idea what a silly goose I am. What an absolute what an absolute silly duck I could be, and the things I get up to. And Naomi, thank you for complimenting my Instagram. I spend so much energy in making that a quality account. Instagram page. This page is my alibi. Just
I don't
so
know. I think
all
I
the
just
list.
like
I might get some followers from this.
I don't know if I like followed you. I don't know how I found you on Instagram, but I just like followed you and right away it was like good memes and I was like, this is a quality human right now, right here.
This is my first time meeting Joel. Uh
What's
Moving
your
away from
favorite red
religion.
flag, Eric? Let's just jump right in.
oh
Tell us about red
oh this
flags.
is
What's your favorite? What's your least favorite?
let's see. I just want to preface this by saying I have a very limited experience because I was working as a domestic violence advocate for over 4 years, working in Phoenix with mainly Hispanic women. We Domestic violence is crossing socioeconomic barrier, lines. It crosses national ethnic lines. Is I like to think of it as one of the first real one of the first categories of discrimination since the dawn of man. I think before there was like race and politics and class. I think there was sexism and misogyny. But I like to think that my male privilege impacts how I view the issue. Um, I wanted to clarify what red flags is to me. So there are deal breakers and then there are red flags. So like wearing Crocs on the first date, maybe a deal breaker for you. I wouldn't say red flag. I think red flag is trendy right now. I think a red flag would, in my definition, would be something that puts your stability or health or life at risk. This could be something that can interrupt your job or your income, something that can send you to the hospital or affect your relationships. Those are red flags. We're implying there is danger of some sort. We could talk about icks and deal breakers, but I think there have been times where I did have to explain that not all things can be considered abuse, or all things can be considered a red flag, but it could be something that makes you uncomfortable, or it could be something that's not your preference in a relationship. So I did want to make that distinguishment. Like, I would like to, I guess, up the ante and say, like, we're talking about some serious stuff, some trigger warning stuff of physical violence and sexual assault, things that involve manipulation, coercion, and all types of bad person behavior. Um, my understanding of red flags comes from living in America and living in Arizona. And different countries might have a different threshold. to what is concerning dating behavior. What are red flags? What do red flags look like in Mexico or across the oceans? Um, I think when we're talking about red flags, I do want to be, candid in like what I've seen, in my personal life, things that have happened in my family, things that I see happen to my neighbors, or things that my friends have want to confide in me. But also, I developed my own understanding of red flags from these observations. And I do want to share some anecdotes of things that have definitely made me feel unsafe in my dating history. So to tie it back to what I wanted to convey is, red flags to me are pretty much how I look at them are precursors or things that actively happen in abusive relationships.
Yeah, I think also we discussed the book The Gift of Fear, and one of the things the author talks about is, there are some potentially concerning behaviors that partners may exhibit, which may cause you to like raise your eyebrows and maybe start thinking seriously about your security and your safety in the relationship. But he's also like, look, not all of these behaviors are inherently bad, not all of them indicate an abusive partner. Some of them can just be how individuals were raised, and they may not like be things you like, and they could be a relationship deal breaker, but they don't necessarily mean that the partner is like objectively bad. And I do think red flags can vary, as you're saying, in cultural contexts, where something that may be considered inappropriate behavior in one cultural context may not have quite the same connotation in another. So I do think it is
I
important to distinguish that.
I wanted to pull up some information. I love citing my sources because I know who to point the finger to if I'm wrong. Um, so I can be a little bit verbatim, but there is a lot of organizations nationwide that provide awareness to domestic violence. Red flags are really connected in the domestic violence prevention mission, and I'm gonna get right into it. I think one that even I guess young children can understand and their underdeveloped notion of dating, they don't know what they're in for, is telling you what you never do. Sorry, telling you what you can and cannot do. Having a controlling, let's just say a controlling hand on your partner's life.
I think that's a good one, and I think that I like that you made it clear that even like little kids can figure out like what's controlling and what's not. Like some like they'll look at their parents and be like, "Don't tell me what to do," or like they'll look at somebody who's not their parents and like, "You're not my mom," or something like that. So like that makes a lot of sense, but I also like that a lot of people just don't. The biggest thing that I think a lot of people don't understand is the manipulation that comes along with that and the gaslighting of, oh, I'm not making you do this thing. You're doing it out of your own
Mhm.
will, even though their partner is controlling them.
And I think we've discussed this as well, with regards to sex ed in schools, where a lot of people talk all about how like dangerous and insidious it is to teach kids about like sex and relationships. But when you're doing it in nearly all instances, it's stuff like this, where you're like, here's what might be inappropriate behavior. And you're, explaining this to third graders. Hey, if someone's making you feel uncomfortable, here's how you articulate it. It's not, super graphic, detailed
Mhm.
stuff. And so it's always frustrating when people decry like the insidious, perverts that are teachers around
Mhm.
the nation, because it's people who are trying to keep kids safe, who are giving them the skills and knowledge they need to have like healthy emotional intelligence at different age levels. It's not as though they're coming out of nowhere with like complete nonsense that's inappropriate for these age levels.
I forgot to bring up. I said I cite my sources and completely omitted that. This is from the National Domestic Violence Hotline. Please understand that the National Domestic Violence Hotline is a hotline that will connect you to state resources. Um, so next thing, so the telling you what you can and can't do. First off, that's social, that's emotional and like mental abuse, right? It doesn't have to be physical violence, but as Naomi hinted, it's very manipulative. it can involve coercion, do this or something bad's going to happen, or you have to do what I feel like is right, because I have control over you. Um, and there definitely could be a lot of nuance with this one. And this is one where, like, for instance, if I try to motivate my partner to go back to grad school, well, am I being controlling or am I being encouraging? I think this is definitely one that is a red flag if it begins to damage or interrupt, stability, and, like, if this becomes something where the person feels like that they have no control of their life. Another one would be, this is definitely something that comes up in most relationships, but I'm gonna say it: showing extreme jealousy of your friends or time spent away from them. Any thoughts?
That's a really big one. I have to say that, like, if you're in a tough spot with your partner, like, let's just say the relationship is rocky, you obviously want to spend more time with your partner in order to, like, reconnect. But it's also good in those types of situations to, like, spend time apart. So, like, you go to the gym by yourself and you go out to dinner by yourself, or you do those things and you reconnect with yourself, and that's a really good habit of getting into. But if you're partner's not letting you do those things, you're not keeping those healthy boundaries. You're not an individual, you're just one cohesive mess.
Mm-hmm. I've been thinking a
Keyword
lot more
here
about.
being, sorry, I just want to say this one shit went as far as to say extreme jealousy. So this isn't your, oh, you have a handsome coworker. This is, who are those people that are always hitting up your line? Who, like, are you cheating on me at all times? That type of mood.
I had a friend, and this friend is gonna remain unnamed. This friend was in a relationship for about 2 years, and she was like, "We're gonna get married." They planned the proposal together, like everything like that. They were living together. This was like during the pandemic, so it was like when everyone was starting to live together because they didn't want to spend time apart in their relationship. And every single day he'd like go through her phone, he would go through her Gmail, and like from seventh grade, like when Gmail was like new and you like email your friends some like stupid shit, you know what I mean? So like back in middle school he went back and he was like, who is this person? Block them on Gmail, block them like on all this shit. We were in a Starbucks line once, we were in the drive-through, and it was taking too long. And so she was like, take a selfie with me. And I was like, why? We're in a Starbucks line. And she was like, oh, I need to like prove to my like boyfriend that I'm not like cheating on him right now. And I was like,
Wow.
oh, okay.
I think partners that are extremely jealous do need that constant validation or reassurance. I saw extreme jealousy in 100% of the abusive relationships that I worked with professionally. And I am a male domestic violence advocate working with women. It was very common when we were out, let's just say, doing appointments, we're doing we're getting a restraining order hearing, or we're just trying to get food stamps at the DES line, and somebody would assume that I am the new partner, which makes my job an occupational hazard for very, let's just say, very dangerous partners, very toxic partners.
So how do you work around that? Did you do your best to like do things on off hours when they might be at work? Did you try to like, I don't know, dress
The
down so you looked less
the
attractive? How does that work?
Actually, dressing up, I
Oh,
would rather be I would rather put on my tie, and then people would think that I'm like the lawyer or the let's just say, like a counselor. Technically was a counselor. But safety planning is something that somebody in an abusive relationship does without knowing it. They know how to avoid getting hit or avoid an argument that would cause really bad injury, or they know their partner's temper, or let's just say their triggers, and they know how to keep themselves safe, because the pattern of abuse, keyword pattern, allows people to recognize ways that to avoid conflict. But then that's where the fear now creates a pattern of control. and just kind of enabling that toxic behavior. How would I avoid it, man? I got some voicemails a couple times that really shook me to my core of just like, I don't know who you are, but I see your phone number in my baby mama's phone, and that's not okay. Just like we hashed this out like, man, and I got a new number. Made me feel extremely gross to hear that on my voicemail. There's been other times where I've been in a courtroom for a divorce hearing, and I'm getting stared down from across the courtroom gallery, and I'm just trying to keep a brave face, as if like if I show fear, he wins. And I do say he because um I might be pulling up an outdated stat, but nearly 90 to 95% of all domestic violence victims that seek help, services like shelters and advocacy, are women. And of those, a very, very large percent of abusers are men. So we can we can spend time to acknowledge that there is abuse in same-sex relationships. Men do experience abuse. But if we're looking at the percentage and proportion of who it is impacting, um, it is women that are facing the most negative outcomes. I think this would be a good transition for another one of these red flags coming from the hotline website. Preventing or discouraging you from spending time with friends, family, or peers. So, assuming this is not jealousy, but this is just preventing somebody from using their support systems. How do you guys read that?
I mean, I don't know if you can't read that as a good sign. Like, that's obviously a red flag. I do have to ask though, like, kind of jumping back, in those
Mm-hmm.
scary situations, we like to talk a lot about like self-care. How do you self-care
Oh.
in those situations?
Self-care to me means compartmentalizing your feelings. Taking like I guess a radical powerlessness approach of just like I can I cannot I cannot prevent these things from happening. I am on the same earth and as you guys, experiencing this weird disarray of chaos. And I can only do so much. So kind of just taking a step back and saying, it was impossible for me to prevent this abuse from happening and all of the consequences that are happening because of it. And I have an opportunity to have a very limited window of how I can provide support for somebody, and all of these professional relationships that I've made with these clients will are temporary, and then I have to really just acknowledge that for my limited window of helping somebody, I did my best. I immediately shed the work skin. Again, two different people. There's work Eric and normal Eric, and that starts the second I get in my car and head home. That's when the decompression starts. I'll just put on a Blink 182 song, scream at the top of my lungs, call somebody that I love, and just honestly try to catch up and have lighthearted conversations. And I often tell people not to ask me about work. I do not need somebody to say, "How was your day?" I need somebody to say a really off-color joke or something like a really, let's just say something that's like incredibly like some stimulating conversation or a nice segue into whatever, like sorry, a nice like transition into not having to be in that vicarious trauma.
Eric, I do want to return to what you said, but I'm interested
Yeah.
now as you're talking about this. What drew you to this line of work? Like, is this something you always wanted to do, or did you just kind of fall into it based
Yeah.
off of your education and experience?
I wanted to do something that was incredibly versatile and that could allow me to kind of be in any type of setting I wanted to be. And social work, I think I think everyone will encounter a social worker at one point in their life, whether it's when they're a kid or when they're in their old age. If you've been to a hospital, a whole social workers probably came up to you. If you were at school going through some saddies, throwing some, feeling some stressy, you probably interacted with a social worker. Um, it's an incredibly vague position, and I like that. I like being able to say, I've never been the type of person to say I'm gonna do one thing for the rest of my life. I'm gonna do everything, and
Sure.
I just kind of found myself always valuing service to others, and now I get to be you know talking to y'all about what is to me like something incredibly important. um Really terrible treatment of partners towards each other, really terrible treatment of parents and their children, terrible treat I mean, I've even seen terrible incidents of abuse happening between siblings and between grandparents and other types of family systems. These are where our lives start, in our homes and with our with our loved ones, and this is where a lot of the abuse can start. It can start at a very early age. It can be normalized at a very early age. And I knew that it would be incredibly rewarding to try to make healthier relationships.
Yeah, you were initially talking about this, and I thought you were talking about like developing the skill set necessary to do this. And I that's obviously not where you went, but I work in an environment that forces me to interact with people on a management level very consistently.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things I notice is they have almost no emotional intelligence whatsoever, and they tend to avoid difficult conversations and put off difficult meetings because they just don't have the skills to communicate with a wide range of personality types. And when I was
Mm-hmm.
younger in high school, I used to think that like the platonic ideal of like being an adult was having this like really good repertoire of knowledge, whether facts and statistics, or being able to solve complicated math problems. And I think post college, I kind of developed this more comprehensive understanding where I believe in order to be most successful in the world, emotional intelligence is far more
Mm-hmm.
helpful. That the variety of situations in which you'll need to utilize an ability to communicate with a wide range of people is something you're going to encounter a lot more than, tell me, the Pythagorean theorem, tell me, how, the Battle of Thermopylae was fought, things like that. And so I guess I do wonder, do you think your skills have enhanced your ability to communicate? And is that something you think you might take into other careers as you continue to move through
Absolutely.
your
I,
life?
I I I said in the beginning I wanted to be candid. I think somebody referred to it as like academic armor. It's like I'm not gonna sit here and use big words so that I prove my credibility. I want to sit here and be very human. It's like, you guys ever heard the term like microaggression in like as a racist term? People that work blue collar jobs don't say microaggressions, even though they experience it, you know what I mean? And things like that. Like, average people don't acknowledge how systemic misogyny is affecting their lives, but they do feel it. So being able to use like normal terms and saying like, deep, like, we can all agree, right? Feeling afraid of your partner is something that can negatively impact your life. And then kind of being able to take 5-page papers and synthesize them to like 2 or 3 ideas so that they're understandable to general, like, to larger populations. That's what took me a while to take. That's what took me a while to practice. Kind of shedding that, um I guess, shedding that type of understanding that to be credible or representing a cause, you have to be highly, highly academic.
Yeah,
I'm so
I
sorry,
Do you
my
have
fire
something?
alarm is going off right now.
Oh, you say your fire alarm is going off?
There was a fire in the oven.
Oh, okay. Are you in a safe place?
Naomi, are you in a
I
domestic violence situation? Does your partner
it
set fires to get your attention?
I did actually want to, if this conversation really wanted to get scarier, we could talk about what are risk factors that can increase your likeliness of homicide in an abusive relationship. But I
I
didn't want to get you. Want to talk about more of the other red flags if you guys are up for it.
I
Oh,
would,
I mean, yeah, if we want to return to that,
yeah.
I'll say
Yeah.
this. In regards to, extreme jealousy, not wanting to do things, with friends.
Uh-huh.
Look, I'm an introverted individual. I get emotionally exhausted spending, significant amounts of
Uh-huh.
time with my partner. If someone else can take them off my hands, if someone else can plan activities, that
Yes.
gives me more time to nap or, do stuff around the house. This desire for control is not something I
Yeah.
fully understand. And I think,
The,
yeah, you should not want to spend every waking moment with your partner. I think that can
the
breed resentment and unhappiness, and it's time apart where you can really appreciate the qualities that you initially attracted to in the first place.
power and control as a theme in all of these red flags. That's the golden thread in all abusive conduct. Power and control. So when I hear preventing or discouraging you from friends and family, it insinuates a type of clinginess, like, oh, I always need to have eyes on you. Or on the other more malicious end, if it is done intentionally, it is taking away your support system, so you're dependent on me. You can't talk to mom or dad. I'm not letting that happen because then you're gonna slip through my fingers. That's what abusers. That's a tactic that abusers can use, taking away all of their lifelines. And also keep in mind, these lifelines could be putting earworms in, like, hey, this is not okay. What he's doing to you is very dangerous and you should come stay with us, or I'll help you get away from him. Abusers can catch on to subtleties like that, or let's just say they can have a heightened paranoia and thinking that these supports for the person are actually things that could make them lose their power.
I have to ask, you mentioned earlier on in this conversation that the vast majority of like they the vast majority of people get used to abusive cycles early on in their life. Do you think that something like controlling like this, like where do you think that comes from? Or do you think it's just like, oh, this person is so scared and they're scared to lose their partner that they'll do anything to stay in that relationship?
I think the power and control is a little bit addictive. And I think there's a lot of reasons why somebody would do anything to keep that power and control. Um, I think the complex thing of answering that question is that love. Like everybody forgets that love is always in the background as the foundation of all of this. And love will make you do crazy things, or things like that. It can kind of change your reasoning and judgment. But as far as somebody not wanting you to talk to your family, to spend time with your friends, to use your other supports, that's an innate red flag. I think with or without context. And maybe you can make some type of argument like, hey, I don't want you to talk to your mom because when you talk to your mom, you feel bad about yourself. Okay, that's a little bit more nuance. Like there's another layer there.
Hmm.
But if somebody said, I don't want you to spend time with other people because your time is my time, right? Because you're my partner and you're always supposed to be here with me. That could on a very, let's just say, low risk scale, that could be your partner just feeling lonely. Maybe you feel lonely and you don't want to spend time at home while your partner's with their friends. Okay. You might ask them to stay in for that one day, but understand how that comes across. You're what's the word? Monopolizing someone else's time. That the I kind of wanted to rapid fire some of these because some of these are so good that we can kind of break them in together.
I did want to
Insulting,
throw
yeah.
just one comment in. a recurring theme we've returned to over and over on this podcast is for men in particular, often it seems they don't want a partner. They want like a sex doll. They want like a
Mm,
laundry robot. They want, someone
yes.
who can fulfill their sexual fantasies and also be their mom simultaneously.
Oh
And
yeah.
I think well, oh boy, maybe that was poor phrasing on my part. But in the same way, I think abusers don't think of their partner as equivalent in value to them. Because
Mm,
if they were equivalent in value to them, they would recognize, oh, this person has and deserves autonomy and personal freedom and expression and all of that. They think of them as like kind of just a Barbie doll, and they have a lot of control over the choices they make. Because again, it's thinking of them as like the sex doll mom. Like
mm-hmm.
you're not equivalent to me. You're someone who's subservient to me, who's meant to meet all of my desires. And so I think a lot of abusive tactics stem from this like just base level dehumanization of women as entities that are valid of respect. And if you see some of those thoughts and opinions in individuals, that might itself be a red flag.
Go off, Joel. I loved all of that because um if we can look at domestic violence from a gender lens and let's acknowledge the internalized misogyny and that is always fueling this or at least informing these behaviors and shooting off to what I think was another a red flag that ties into what you said: insulting, demeaning, or shaming you in front of others or alone. Domestic violence so often happens behind closed doors. If you have ever encountered a situation of couples um of somebody being abused or just something that like felt really icky, like a red flag that you see, and let's just say somebody talking to their partner in a very degrading way, um to consider what you haven't seen and consider how abusers are aware of perception. They can also it's intentional. They can also turn it on and off. So they can be punching walls, throwing plates, and the second the police officer shows up for a welfare check, it is nothing is wrong. It is totally fine in this household. I have no idea why the neighbors would call 911, and then they can turn back the extreme toxicity. So insulting, demeaning, and shaming you, I think we've learned how to recognize that. We're easy to point out when somebody is being disrespectful and degrading. But what do we do when it happens to us? You guys have any thoughts on how that makes you feel?
So I personally was in a relationship like this for a very long time, and things like that never really clicked with me. I just thought that that's what the way relationships were. Because at first it started with just like mistakes that would happen in public. Oh, you dropped my drink, or like we went out for coffee and you dropped my drink. Well, I didn't take that as a red flag because I was just like, oh, well, he was just mad because he spent $8 on a Dutch Bros or something. Fast forward to the relationship that I'm in now, did the same thing because, your girl be clumsy. And he was like, oh, don't worry about it. Like, I'll just go get someone to like help clean it up. Like, it's not a big deal, like moving past it very quickly. So I didn't, I think I was like young enough that I didn't recognize that that was something that was just like automatically not a good thing. Like, he would yell and scream at me for making like dumb mistakes like that. And I think it was just it was a young thing where I just didn't understand that. But and the list continues. That's just one example of it. But I think that the biggest thing is that a lot of us are just not taught what is good and what is acceptable in a relationship and what is bad and what is like awful in a relationship. Because I personally was only taught like, oh, if he ever hits you, run. But I was never taught like the if he ever emotionally manipulates you, then run. You know what I mean? And
Mm-hmm.
so I would say that the vast majority of the time people just don't understand like what is right and what's wrong in a relationship. I don't know why I put quotes around wrong. What's wrong is wrong.
Well, I think, media is certainly to blame here, but I also think it's difficult to like accurately portray domestic violence in a nuanced way in like a 2 hour
Mm-hmm.
movie, or even like in a prolonged, multi-season TV show. Like,
Mm-hmm.
you would need to have pretty clever writing where like a, significant other is commonly dropping insults against their partner, and there's scenes and asides where they're telling them to tone down their behavior and that they shouldn't go out, and there's a subplot maybe where a bunch of people, a bunch of friends in a friends group met up and one of them didn't show
Yeah.
up and they never offer an explanation of why they didn't show up. Like, there's ways of doing it, but I don't think like that's the priority in a lot of writing rooms. It's much easier to just give this visual shorthand of person punches other person, therefore person bad. And I think, again, there's media out there, there's literature, there's TV series that have done this, but it's just not common enough because it just takes so much time
Mm-hmm.
and energy to set up.
And we're calling these red flags for a reason. This is supposed to be an indicator for you guys when you guys encounter this, and for people that experience it. So I kind of I wanted to just kind of add that, like, I'm enjoying this conversation because these types of convos give us a better understanding of how to respond when we see it. We can kind of rehearse what we do, or how we react when we kind of see that. And when it comes to like demeaning and shaming, I mean, I have roast culture in my friend group. We very often belittle each other, but it's a tone. I think what makes this a red flag is the indication of lack of empathy for somebody's self-worth and self-esteem, and I guess a better understanding of how they view you as important, how they view you in importance, or things like that. I think I don't wouldn't say this was a red flag, but something that made me feel uncomfortable in this way um was like anytime I'll feel emasculated for being sensitive. So it'll just be like I'll just be like, hey, like don't um pull my hair. That hurt. And then it turns into my weakness now being the focus. Or things like that. I'm just like, hey, like just because I stand up for something, or just because I draw a boundary, doesn't mean that I'm overreacting, overly sensitive. So that just kind of shaping how like this can be a good way of I guess this can start on the first date and grow in intensity very slowly and over time, and it kind of sets the tone of whose opinions are valid, and really who has the expectation of needing to improve. I kind of got lost in that train of thought, but anyways.
Your intent came
I
through.
get
Did you want to do some of those
did
rapid fires?
Oh yeah, I think preventing oh sorry controlling finances, pressure to have sex or perform sexual acts, pressure to use drugs, and intimidation through looks or actions. Let that sink in.
There's an interesting overlap there between like
Mm-hmm.
forced prostitution and domestic
Ooh.
violence.
Yeah, yeah. Human trafficking, sex trafficking. But when I hear pressure, I think manipulation. And again, power control being the common theme. Pressuring someone to do drugs, pressuring someone to have sex. That is for sure somebody thinking that they can have control over somebody's life and doing whatever it takes to make that happen. Whether that's bribing you, coercion, and blackmailing you, using kids or pets as leverage, using the lease of the rental agreement as leverage. My house, my rules. Um, I think the most insidious thing is the controlling of finances. That is something that is one of the main reasons why somebody is unable to leave an abusive relationship.
Well, that's also a big cause of divorces. I don't know the
Mm,
actual breakdown of why people say they get divorces when surveyed, but I know a big complaint in couples counseling and therapy is how the other partner utilizes the finances of the house. So you might
mm-hmm.
have the husband saying my wife spends too much money on shampoo and fancy cosmetics, and the wife is like, well, we need food on the table, and he's always golfing, and there's a back and forth there. And I personally think involvement of your partner in finances is very important. So you both
Mm-hmm.
understand, here's how much we have for X, Y, and Z. If we want to go on vacation this year, we need to be putting away this amount of money every month. If, we plan to get a down payment on a house by next year, this is how much we're going to need, things like that. It's difficult for, a single person to keep track of all of that. And it's really helpful to have multiple eyes on it. But again, if your priority is controlling your partner, maybe it's a load you can shoulder
Mm-hmm.
by yourself.
I would love to talk about totally changing the subject. How does like knowing these things and like being so close to like survivors of domestic abuse, how does that change the way that you date people? Does it make you more
It,
aware or is it like just you can't turn it off?
first off, I used to listen to true crime, not anymore. Um, because true crime is a lot of how's it start? They were the perfect couple. He was the perfect gentleman. And then they find out that, and then they make us think it's not him, but at the end of the 30-minute episode, it was him.
Her
And
headless body was found in
yeah.
3 states. Yeah.
And so I don't know, like, how do we, what's the general perception of it, right? Um, we all feel like it's a little bit of a taboo topic. Not for me, but we all feel like it's a more common, it's like it's a more common situation than like what we think. Again, it's always happening behind closed doors. I feel like every single adult has experienced it or knows somebody who's experienced it. We're talking about one in four women experiencing some type of sexual assault or sexual or sorry, or some type of abuse from a male. We're talking about like more like 1 in 7 men experiencing it themselves. So if we're talking raw numbers, it's so prevalent. I don't know. I think we're almost at epidemic levels. Mexico, the country of Mexico, has declared it an epidemic, and considering how powerful that means as far as like community health, of acknowledging that something is so dangerous it's reached epidemic proportions. Um, for me, how it's affected my dating, I like to think that I am able to practice my boundaries and I am able to assert my like whenever like I don't feel comfortable, but that's not the case. I think my last relationship went in shambles because when I tried to leave, when I said girlfriend, it's over, it became a cyber stalking of where I'm just getting my phone's getting blown up with some very deep uh sorry, some like very harsh uh sorry, I'm trying to think of the word, but just insults. It's something that I think I have a tough skin, but this person really dug deep and made me feel afraid of what else this person was capable of. Friends were calling me, telling me that hey, what's wrong? I'm getting messages from your ex saying that like you're a bad person and that you're a fake friend and that you hate me, and I'm just like, don't believe anything they have to say. I'd never thought I'd find myself in this situation. I thought my job was to help people after this, but also consider the context. I'm trying to leave, and now things get worse. I knew that statistically, when somebody is highest likely to be killed by their partner, it's when they attempt to leave. And I didn't think I was gonna get killed, but I did think that I was gonna get a crazy ex showing up to my job. I thought my ex was gonna call my job and say, "Hey, you have a fake person working with you. You should fire him." I thought I was gonna get my car slashed or something, and that was when there was not even that was when there wasn't even any threat of that actually happening. That was my assumption. Imagine, and that's the tricky thing about fear and safety, it's a state of mind. Imagine if somebody did put that in writing that they were going to harm you, your family, or something you care about. And then you start to reason in your head the probability, but it doesn't matter because the fear is there. And it can be crippling. It can be very, very like disempowering to feel like, oh, at any time anyone can just, especially people that know you really well, anyone can just pick up my whole life and shatter it to pieces if they had that malicious intent. So how has it affected my relationships? I think I'm extremely sensitive to these red flags. But am I brave enough to, I guess, leave a relationship or detach from somebody that I have grown a bond with? That is I don't know, it takes a lot more consideration.
You said you don't listen to true crime, and I was thinking about that the entire time you were talking. And,
Mhm.
true crime audiences, especially for podcasts, tend to skew heavily women. I've seen some stats
Yeah.
indicate 75% of true crime podcast listeners are women or, self-identifying as female. And the problem is a lot of that media tends to be sensationalized stories where it's
Hmm.
like, this serial killer was stalking women along this highway, or, here's some crazy,
Yeah.
gory story. And it's not reflective of, I think, the average experience of a domestic violence victim or someone who might experience violence in their lifetime. And women might get the false impression that, they're gaining knowledge and skills to confront, crime when it's
Hmm.
probably going to be a lot more innocuous, something that, comes from someone they know, whether it's a partner or a family member or a friend. It's similar, I guess, to like men in survivalist media where they think it's like, all
Oh
about wearing
yeah.
camo and, ammunition clips and having as many guns as possible. But you talk to any person who like has studied this and they're like, no, the things you need to know are how to grow food and like where to put your latrines so you're not contaminating your water supply. Like
Hmm.
it's kind of a play acting of the actual skills you need. It's not unfortunately embracing the key ideas and concepts that would allow people to
Hmm.
walk away with the skills and knowledge needed in order to confront a situation on their own.
uh I love how we you guys naturally tie in like media and like the trouble with rom-coms and all that. The little crash course, domestic violence didn't really become sexy until like the 80s. OJ Simpson was like in the 90s
To
was a
be clear, this
trial.
podcast does not think domestic violence is sexy. That is an opinion of Erick Escalara,
Sorry,
our guest.
sorry. I just wanted to say like trendy in the media, like the news and movies and other types of sensational media that present domestic violence in more of like an entertaining way or appealing and dramatic way didn't really start until the 80s. The 1980s, of course. Now, all this time it has been growing in understanding and awareness and complexity. We're putting so much more resources for the victims, which we call survivors as well, type of reframing. And now where are we at now? Like we still kind of fall into this loop of I guess, these tropes of, oh, it damaging, sorry, explosive rage is actually a sign of passion, and intense, let's just say, conflict is actually a way to grow resiliency in a relationship. It's like, no, these are very terrible examples that we do get of relationships and terrible fear mongering from the incidents where survivors of domestic violence were murdered in cold blood. And then now we have this type of growing trend of actually romanticizing serial killers and mass murderers and giving them their own biopics so that we understand what they were
Yeah.
like in high school and what did other people think about them and how they could believe in Among Us. I think in a way they are giving a representation towards red flags, but in a disrespectful way for the victims for sure.
I think, this also underscores why it's so important to teach emotional intelligence and recognizing this stuff in school, because very few people think that they're ill prepared for relationships they may think, oh, I don't have a lot of experience, but rarely are they going to seek out media that's like, here are relationship tips 101. You're obviously going to get a lot more clicks on, your video that discusses, sexy serial killers throughout the ages than something that's like, here's, how to identify risk factors for dummies. I was reminded, in the 1990s, there was a lot of discussion about how democracy could be brought to the third world by bringing them internet. And everyone was like, well, if we just bring in the internet, these people are going to democratize their nations. They're going to rise up and stage revolutions once they have access to the information the internet can provide. And when they actually brought in the internet to rural areas, the first thing most people did was like look up naked photos of celebrities, because they're not interested in the day to day about like how to enhance the democracy of their area. They're interested in, the quick entertaining thing. And in the same way, I think, unfortunately, our media is not geared in an educational aspect. Very rarely are adults going to be going out and trying to, fill in the missing gaps of their knowledge. And that's why it's so important to give these skills and knowledge to people when they're young, rather than waiting until they're already at risk or already in relationships where they need that.
I would love to wrap up this episode with a quick fire questions for Erick here.
Oh, okay.
So can you give me just like you've been dating this person named girlfriend for 8 months now.
Mhm.
How did you guys meet? Like just quick fire question, answer. Let's
I
go.
love this. So I met this person. You guys can tell me your real opinion. I can take it. I met this person 2 weeks after my last relationship, where the girl was just slandering me and wouldn't leave me alone. And I felt like, oh my God, I have somebody out there in the world that is now an enemy. And I had all this animosity and anger because of it. So I did tell my bartender what I was going through. I was like, yeah, I just went through a breakup. And my bartender told me that they would like to invite me to an after work drink. And I took her up on it. And now we've been seeing each other steadily. But I think having that honesty and vulnerability from the jump, like I am fresh out of a short 2 month relationship, but that didn't really end well. This is me being single, and she picked up on the tone.
Erick, if your partner is trying to utilize chemical dependency, you should talk to
Ah,
someone.
now you think my partner sees an opportunity, saw somebody vulnerable, needed a rebound, and capitalized on it. She probably did, but like I don't think I was innocent in it. I think I definitely was throwing out feelers. I
Sure,
think
sure.
I think I have a very flirty personality, but when it comes to people that I actually like feel like I want to date, I actually tend to be really stoic and kind of like shy. But she is somebody who I have a lot in common with, and I think she likes to I guess be herself in a very entertain. She likes to present as entertaining and fun at all times, always trying to get a laugh out of me, and I really really love that. She doesn't exactly feel like her previous relationships have left her feeling like secure or I guess assured that she can be a good partner. So I do have to provide that reassurance. I do have to make her feel confident that she's in a safe relationship with me. And I guess we kind of we do learn how to be in relationships from previous experiences, but I like to, I guess, envision a type of like partner I want to be. It's like if I don't see it exist, I just create it in my mind. It's like a type of like model, and I just try to like live through that standard. My philosophy on dating is that two people should be able to live their lives parallel to each other and rely on each other for social support, rely on each other in many ways. But they are living separate lives, and those lives should be able to interact in a healthy way rather than a controlling, manipulative,
I,
insulting
I,
way.
I want to let Naomi move on, but I do think it's worth commenting. Service workers are hit on constantly throughout the day. So the fact that one of them asked you out is a really good endorsement of either your looks or
Yes.
charm.
Yes, thank you so much. Yeah, I didn't ask her out. I planted the bait, and she capitalized.
I
Nice.
honestly don't think I have a I this might just be my opinion because I'm also in a relationship that started pretty soon after my last relationship, but I honestly don't think that's a bad thing. I think that different people heal in different ways, and if you're if you're able to heal in a relationship with somebody else that has had similar experiences with you, whether that be long term or short term, great. If you can move past those traumatic incidents and like keep going with your relationship, awesome. So I'm a huge proponent of like move on at your own pace. Like there's no certain time period that you need to wait after one relationship to move on to the next.
Naomi,
Thank
you're
you
supposed to be
so
doing lightning
much.
round. I'm taking over.
I'm so
Eric,
sorry.
tell us about your favorite rom com.
Oh, favorite rom-com where Harry met Sally. Tell me a more
Yes,
realistic depiction of a friendship turning into a relationship. The movie took place over 15 years.
Joel
They're
hates that movie.
insufferable. They're insufferable in their own ways. I hate both of them, but then I love them at the same time.
My
Love
one
it.
issue with that movie is, and I think we should probably do a full length episode at this at some point because it's consistently ranked as like the top romantic comedy film of
Yeah.
all time. My one issue is the thesis of the movie at the start is that men and women can't just be friends. And the end of
Oof.
the movie is them, after years of spending time together, both as a couple and friends, deciding they can
Mhm.
only be together as a couple. And I think if that movie
Mhm.
had not had as big of a cultural impact, it would have been perfectly fine to have this message and just say, well, they can be friends, but in some instances, it's better if they're in a relationship. But
Yeah.
unfortunately, because it was so popular and endearing to people, the message that the most popular romantic movie of all time has is if men and women spend enough time together, they're going to be dating. And I
You're
find
right.
that's a little frustrating.
Joel just hates everything. Every single movie that we watch, he's like, this sucks and this sucks and this sucks and I'm right and you're wrong. And Joel just hates love. That's what I've come to.
It's true.
Let's see. Harry Met Sally is a good one. I don't think it has enough brown people. I can poke holes in things too.
That's fair.
You
Okay.
know what does have a lot of people of color is the Think Like a Man movies, one and
Oh
two.
yes.
We definitely reviewed those on our podcast and had nothing but good things to say.
He's just endorsing former podcast episodes at this point. Okay, well, that was a great two-question lightning round. I would like to finish up this
Yeah.
episode. We asked this of all of our guests. Is there a specific foundation or charity that you would like our listeners to like focus on, donate to, volunteer at?
Yes. So I would like to draw attention to the Arizona Coalition to End Domestic Violence. Say that three times fast. It's also called ACES DV. What the coalition does is it advocates for domestic violence prevention and domestic violence support to survivors in multiple ways. And you can connect with ACES DV and find multiple ways to support the cause. I used to intern there, and I'll just tell you that there are a lot of people putting in so many resources into highlighting healthy relationships. We can't just say don't abuse. We highlight healthy relationships and try to actually get a standard going of what is abuse, how it should be handled, and it is victim informed and victim centered. So we really do take in the voices of people who experienced it and let that inform the cause rather than us professionals thinking like, oh well, we obviously know better. Yeah, Aces DV, please check them out.
Awesome. Okay, any last words of advice before we end this show?
Eric, where can people find your amazing meme Instagram? How can they
Yes.
connect with
Oh,
you?
it is private, but I will add you if you're not a bot. This page is my alibi, is my Instagram. You can also find me out and about being a advocate for healthy communities. If you run into me and cite this podcast, I will smile. If you are someone that I know that is listening to this, thank you for supporting me. Um, and thank you guys for having me on. This was so much fun.
Of course. Well, we
When I
hope
said
everyone.
when I said thank you guys, I meant thank you guys.
He's literally like our father. He's literally like our father, Joel. He just made that joke. Everyone, have a great week. Eric, thank you so much for being on the podcast. Joel, any last words?
Wear a condom.
That was my line.
We have many thanks for the use of our theme music, which is the song Drop by Ketsa. You can find more of their music online at ketsa.uk. You can also find Date These Guys online on Twitter and Instagram at Date These Guys, or visit our website at datetheseguys.org. If you have questions you'd like us to discuss on the podcast or marriage proposals for either of us, shoot us an email at datetheseguys@gmail.com.